So thank you guys for, I know some of you, I actually don't know a lot of you, so thank you guys for coming out. And I want to just kind of introduce you guys to Business Makers Network, give you a little background, and then Steve will come up, and then after that, Cliff will come up, and then we'll do some Q&A, and then we'll close out the night. So we probably about something probably around 8:30 will be done for this evening, and then you're welcome to stay around. I got some cigars, and we can hang out and drink a little scotch and beer and smoke some cigars if you guys want to. So you're welcome to do that too. So, Business Makers Network. I'm gonna go back in time a little bit. I, in 2016, started a podcast and TV show called CrossPolitic, crosspolitic.com. Basically, cross-politic, Jesus Lord over politics. That was the goal. I grew up in Texas, lived in New Mexico, lived in Oregon, lived in California, lived in Colorado, and now I live in Idaho, which is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of Texas a little bit. If you guys know anything about Idaho, it wants to be conservative. It wants to be, gun-carrying, conservative state. So a little redheaded stepchild thing. But I moved, so I grew up in the church. My parents were Christians. They raised me in the church, praise God. But I grew up in a generation, you guys might have had a different experience, but I grew up in a generation where pastors and churches did not apply the Bible to politics, would not apply the Bible to the public square. And so after living in different states, going to 3 colleges, I ended up at University of Idaho in 2002, in Moscow, Idaho, now where I live, and I got involved in college evangelism up on campus, and I started realizing how much my faith matters to the world around me. Not just in my church, not just in my family, but to the politics of everything. And when you go to a public university, we were dealing with DEI back in 2002. It's hilarious to me that DEI became a thing. It was largely because COVID kind of exposed it, really is what it did, exposed the classroom, but that had been going on a long time in college campuses. I ran into that in 2002, 2003, just college evangelism. And so I started realizing, I don't know how to apply the Bible to politics like I think I should. We believe all of Christ for all of life. We believe the Bible applies to everything. And why not, the public square? Why not our politicians? Why not our president? If all of Christ, some of you guys know Abraham Kuyper. He's a Dutch theologian, and he had a great quote where he said, I'm probably going to butcher it too, but it's a great quote, where he said, there's not one square inch where Christ doesn't claim mine. So Christ claims everything. He claims America. He claims Russia. He claims, Ukraine. He claims China. He claims everything. Not one square inch. And we believe, that Jesus is king here and now. So his kingship matters to who we are as a people here on this earth. And so I kind of grew up in this world where there's kind of this disconnection between my faith and politics. And I started to see that also in business. I'm 45 now. I moved to Moscow when I was, 22. So 22 years of my life up to that point, I didn't know how the Bible applied to business too. And any sermon that you heard in the church to businessmen, if it's directed at businessmen, it was largely like, hey, make a lot of money and give it away. Okay, there's some good biblical principles there. Generosity, God, Paul specifically goes after rich guys, be generous with your money. So I don't have a problem with that. But the problem was, what did Jesus teach us? Well, I think the parable of talents is so apt for our time and our businesses and what's going on. Jesus, the king, the master of the house, gives 1 talent to one guy, 5 talents to the other guy, 10 talents to the other guy. And he says, do good with it. I'm going to be gone, come back, and I'll expect a return on this investment. And the guy who had 5 talents came back and said, look, I doubled it. And the guy who had 10 talents said, hey, look, I doubled it. The guy who had 1 talent buried it in the backyard. Who was the wicked man in that parable? Who was the sinner in that parable? Who's the guy who disobeyed the master of the house? It was the guy who he buried his talent. He didn't even lose his talent. He just buried it. I think if he tried to invest it and lost it, the master would have said, hey, good job for trying. Give me my talent back. But this guy buried it, and the master rebuked him for it. But I think, encouraging the business community to go out and to take what God has given you and double it. That's you being a good and faithful servant. And that's something that I don't think the church has done very well with. I'll exclude the charismatic church out of this. Charismatic church actually, they know that their work is for the kingdom. Now they got some funny theology, but the one thing they get right that I think I didn't get right growing up was that, again, all of Christ for all of life. We think the Bible applies to our family, our community, our Christian brothers, sisters, but the Bible applies to everything. It applies to politics and it applies to your business. So you be a good and faithful servant. And so those were kind of, I think, gaps in my theology that I had growing up. And then when I started Cross Politics in 2016, I was actively, having to grow and be in front of my audience and how to apply the Bible to, Trump being elected, or how to apply the Bible to Biden being elected, or how to apply the Bible to transgenderism, all this political ramifications of bad worldview thinking. And so I had to start reading a lot, the Bible, and I had to start reading about politics, law. I mean, when 2020 hit, I had never read a study on masking. I'd never read a study on, the spread of, flu. And I find myself reading all these studies because, COVID became the big political thing that we had to sort through in that moment. And the cool thing is God actually gives very simple explanations on how to deal with things like COVID. Abraham Kuyper, to actually bring in Abraham Kuyper into this again, he points out that God gives us 3 forms of government from Scripture. 3 forms of government that he created. He gave us the civil government. That's an authority given by God. That's Romans 13. He gave us the church government, right? That's, 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, Ephesians 5. He gave us the church government as its own government. It has certain responsibilities. And he gave us the family government, mom and dad. And, mom and dad are in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. What does that sound like? Sounds like the government. No, that's mom and dad's job. Health, education, welfare. Mom and dad's job, right? And so, if the church just had that paradigm in 2020, they never would have shut down their church. No, God gave us the authority to oversee the elders. God gave us the elders' authority to oversee church worship, not the federal government, not the civil government. And so, just kind of basic 101 theology on just understanding the governments God gives and the unique, limited authority that he's given church government, civil government, family government. That's where that's a limited government is a Protestant doctrine. Comes from the Bible, comes from scriptures. And so if the church just had that, we would have handled COVID so differently. One of the things, just kind of it's not really a side note because it applies to how Business Makers started, was in 2020, I live in a blue dot in a red state, okay? Moscow, Idaho, blue dot, red state. Moscow's a college town, University of Idaho. It's just dominated by liberals. And, there's no conservatives on city council. There's no conservatives in leadership in the city and all that stuff. So 2020 hits. And in 2020, in March of 2020, you guys remember that? March 2020? 2 weeks, slow the curve, 2 weeks. Yeah, right. Our city council shut down businesses in our town, and there wasn't even one case of COVID in town yet. Not even one known case. And they're like, we're shutting it down. So I blame my city council for allowing COVID in town because they shut it down. Came in after the shutdown. And our city council, they shut down downtown, and they put in effect a health emergency order that even outside, if you weren't wearing a mask within 6 feet, if you were in six feet of someone, you had to wear a mask outside. And they sent cops with clipboards downtown. The Orwellianness of what was going on in our town. Not one case of COVID yet, and we're shutting everything down. And the way my church protests, when city does something crazy like this, because it was very crazy, we'd go outside and sing psalms and hymns for 20 minutes, men, women, and children, and strollers. In the middle of downtown, there's a place called Friendship Square. We'd go sing there. And after a while of doing that, we wouldn't have any Molotov cocktails. We'd just, have a hymn book in our hands. And we'd sing psalms for 20 minutes, wouldn't stay around, and we'd leave. After that, be done. We started doing that once a month. BLM came through, all that stuff. They weren't doing any violence in our town, but they came through, did the same thing, did their protests in downtown. So, but after a couple months of doing that, they started sending cops, set them up on buildings, cameras, looking around, watching us, filming us sing. I mean, there's still footage. You can Google on the internet. It's just so Orwellian what they're doing. And so finally, after 6 months, in September 2020, we said, well, let's go to City Hall parking lot and protest and kind of increase and ramp up the intention of our protest. And we wouldn't even no one would have a megaphone and be screaming, city council, you suck, get rid of this health emergency order. We wouldn't do that. We just sing. That's all we did. Gather 200 people, sing psalms, and again, men, women, and strollers. And when we arrived to City Hall parking lot that night, about 5 o'clock right after work, they had paid city staff, the mayor paid city staff to spray paint circles 6 feet apart in the parking lot. They'd cleared the cars out of the parking lot 6 feet apart. It looked like polka dots. I thought it was a game when I was walking up there. I was like, oh, they're playing some fun game for the kids or something. And then we start singing psalms. I'm cutting some of the stories short. They had 8 cops against City Hall wall. And we started singing. Long story short, they came and arrested me for not wearing a mask and not standing 6 feet apart from my buddy Tyler. And the weirdest part of this, again, it's on YouTube, you can Google it. They had, the chief of police had to take my hymn book from me, my psalter, my hymn book from me to handcuff me. I had met with my chief of police 2 months before and I said, do not enforce any of this. You're gonna get in trouble. This is not a good look for the cops. So he took my hymn book away from me. They arrested me, they took me off. And another couple, Rachel and Sean, were arrested along with me. So they just picked they were trying to make a point. They picked 3 people out of 200 people to arrest. The problem is we had iPhones. And every angle of my arrest was on an iPhone. And it went viral that night. And then I think 2 or 3 days later, President Trump retweeted it. Now, the funny thing about this story is President Trump retweeted a retweet of that, or retweeted a guy who had the video and said, look, they're arresting Christians in Moscow, Idaho, who were worshiping. And President Trump retweeted that tweet. And it went viral, went all over, and just like my city council, we sued and won a 3-year lawsuit against my city for violating First and Fourth Amendment rights. Thomas More Society backed me. We had a great victory. It's awesome. So I got to pull all their emails in the lawsuit. And them talking about, oh crap, President Trump now retweeted it. It's gonna get worse. Hold on for the ride, kind of thing. So I got to see all the communication, the texting and back and forth. And one of the assistant attorneys was cussing out our church in a text with her dad. And it's glorious what I got to see. I was, related to this. So we got Steve Turley talking tonight on the Patriot economy, and we got Cliff Maloney talking tonight. You guys know Cliff. He's in Pennsylvania. He's kind of political operative here. You get to learn more about him tonight. And I was talking to Cliff. Ralph had introduced me to Cliff. And I was just kind of giving Cliff my backstory. I'm a host across politics here, so I'm doing Business Makers this, and I'm doing all this. And then I said, and then I got arrested in 2020 for kind of fighting COVID stuff in my city. And I said, and President Trump retweeted it. And then Cliff's like, did President Trump retweet? Did he tweet out the arrest, or did he retweet someone else? And I said, actually, he retweeted someone else. And I just figured the guy was irrelevant because Trump was the one retweeting it. Who cares about the guy tweeting the tweet? And Cliff was like, who was the guy's name? And I was thinking, his name's Cliff. So Cliff first retweeted my arrest, and then President Trump grabbed his tweet and retweeted it. So thank you, Cliff, for helping me go viral and everything. Yeah. But what had happened in 2020? So when I got arrested, obviously I became a known figure that year, and I had so many Christians reach out to me, saying so many business leaders and CEOs reach out to me and say, I need a good Christian network of people who I can trust that are fighters. There's other Christian networks out there that they were leaving because they weren't fighting. And so you guys are probably familiar with some of them. I'm friends with some of the CEOs of these other networks and everything, but they were not standing up. And so I had a bunch of people in 2020. I couldn't start it that year. So last year I had a couple CEOs remind me, hey, you need to start this Business Makers Network. And so I started working on it last year, and then we just launched in March. So we really are a new network, businessmakers.network, and go to our website. But the reason originally why we started was because I had a bunch of guys working for Google, Facebook, forced vaccination policies, everything that had gone on in 2020, and like I need advice, I need help, I need fellowship, I need to sort through my problems in the business world. Same thing for the CEOs. Had a bunch of CEOs in 2020 saying, my company's kind of torn about this. Some want to work from home, some want to wear masks, some want to get vaxxed, some want, like it was just, these Christian CEOs were running into all sorts of weird problems that they'd never faced before. And so that's kind of the foundation of what Business Makers kind of grew out of, was creating a business network for Christians who understand that their business is all of Christ for all of life, and that they know being siloed is weakness. Being siloed, that's what the government did to us. They tried to separate us all off. They tried to put us in our corners. They tried to lock us in our houses, and that's a form that's weakness. And so coming together as a group of Christian business leaders is a form of strength and a form of encouragement for one another. And it's kind of like this historical, human capital of, these business leaders, from, employees in Facebook or Google to CEOs of large companies coming together to help each other become greater, bigger, better businessmen. And so there's a couple things that we're going to be doing. We just launched this March. We had about 50 already sign up. I think, Lord willing, by the end of the year, we'll have hopefully about 300 sign up this year. I think that's really what I need to encourage people to renew their membership, because this is kind of like a leadership network. If you got 5 people to sign up, no one's interested in going from here, right? No one's interested in renewing next year. So we know there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of people coming around very interested in what we're doing and joining the network. Even the first month, 50 signups, I think is pretty good for a launch of a network like this. It's hard to get people to sign up to things like this. But I think what we're doing is very encouraging and very interesting to, I think, broader business leaders in Christendom. So we're doing business summits like this. This is kind of to bring local Christian business leaders together and, business owners together to encourage one another. And then, of course, we'd like you guys to join up to our network. It's not required, but would love to. And you guys, I got my business card over there and some other, a pen. You can take a pen with you and all that stuff over there. And I think our magazine's are already gone, but my TV show, we produce a network, a magazine called the Fight Laugh Feast magazine. And we wrote a whole magazine on businesses, building your business for the kingdom, stuff like that. So it looks like you guys got some of those magazines, and it's good information, good CEOs that wrote in it. So the other things that we're going to be doing besides summits, we have an online community, we have an app that you can download and access the community at different levels. And we got a summit already planned for Nashville. So if you guys, I think there's a couple people in Franklin, Nashville area, make sure you follow us and pay attention. We're going to be in Nashville May 1st and 2nd. We're going to be in Washington, Battleground, Washington, outside Vancouver. We're going to be there May 24th, 25th, or 23rd, 24th, whatever that Friday, Saturday is. And then the CEO of Patriot Mobiles joined our network, and we're probably going to be in his neck of the woods in Fort Worth in September, hopefully to be in Phoenix, hopefully this year. I can't travel that much and be away from my family, so I got to pay attention to that. But that's the summit side. And then the last thing that we're really hoping to do, and then I'll talk about some long-term vision, because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver everything we're talking about. But the other thing is we want to use the network for political influence. No Christian business network does that. I think Christians coming together to influence our politicians for godly economic laws that are good for the economy, good for the people, good for the state, that's what we want to do as part of the network. And if, Lord willing, 5 years from now, we have, let's say, $20 billion of represented people in our network and everything, we'll have a good network for influencing leaders. I'm very connected in the political world, and so I think we have a lot of opportunity to use our network together to influence politics. I'm a firm believer. If I had, one of the things we want to do in the future is actually break out business network by chapter, by state. Idaho, Pennsylvania have its own chapter, that kind of thing. If I had 300 business leaders in my network in the state of Idaho representing, $2.5 billion and, represented, revenue, whatever, we could have called Governor Little and been like, hey, don't shut down the state, we got your back. Guarantee that would have changed everything. Because Governor Little, if you know anything about politics in Idaho, he's a corporatist. He listens to corporations. He's pragmatic and he's a corporatist. He's not a principled conservative. And so things like that, I think we could have done for the good of the state. And so we're a little behind where I want to be. But one of the things that is, I think, this is kind of the theme of the Business Makers Summit over this next year. I have a friend who's a CEO. Welcome, come on in. You can grab some food and beer back there and get seated. I have some friends. He's CEO of Armor Republic out of Phoenix. He's the largest body armor producer for civilians. He doesn't have contracts with the government. He's a fantastic Christian CEO, body armor. Man, if you ever put on body armor, you feel like a man. I mean, it's pretty fun. He gave me some. And but the day after President Trump was elected, like his sales tanked. You know, Second Amendment sales tanked across the country because what happened? Trump got elected. We feel better. We don't have the defensive posture with Biden anymore. And I think the church has kind of fallen into this a little bit. We don't have this defensive posture. You have to deal with the tranny bathroom thing in my state or in my city, whatever. And I think the church is getting comfortable under Trump. And I think this is the problem with conservatives, is that we get a victory and we start feeling good about ourselves. We don't feel like we have to fight. This is why conservatives lose votes in mid-election efforts. They feel good about life. And one of the principles of war there's Grandpa Jim in our town. Grandpa Jim, no one probably knows Grandpa Jim, but Grandpa Jim wrote this book called Principles of War. And he talked about how to use principles of war for evangelism. Well, one of the principles he wrote about was the art of pursuing. Pursue. And when you're looking at a presidency like this, when you're looking at a vice president, a secretary of defense, there's a lot of strong Christians actually in this administration. I mean, I pray Trump's a Christian. I believe him on his confession. I think he's got obviously some things to work on, but he's at least some form of Nebuchadnezzar, where he's doing some rational things and then maybe some insane things. At least that. But the church, business leaders, you guys, one of the things we want to do is we want to learn the art of pursuing victory. What better time to grow your business when you aren't in defensive posture? What better time to take risks when you actually could get into an offensive position and know it's a wise move for you? And the church, like, evangelize more. Go out more. Go on college. Why is Charlie Kirk going on college campuses and the church is not? I like Charlie Kirk, like what he's doing. Great. So we want to learn to do more, and this is kind of the 5 talents. Like, God's given us some real opportunity, and Lord willing, we'll have 12 years of this with J.D. Vance, Lord willing. But we could have 12 years of being able to get on the offensive. So that's kind of the vision behind what we're doing with Business Makers Network and what we're wanting to do, and would love as many partners and people to join the network, to grow it. I would love, my long-term vision, I would love to build some sort of like Shark Tank part of the network kind of thing where we can help other entrepreneurs launch their business. We got the CEO who's involved in this industry. We got the sales guy who knows what he's doing. We got the marketing guy. We can kind of put together this little panel if to hear this pitch to help things go. I would love to put together a mentor program as part of this. Already been working on it. Love for people to get involved in mentoring other leaders in our network. So there's some real long-term opportunity in what we want to do. Don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that. But I think, bringing like-minded Christians together, I think knowing what we know about COVID and what exposed, I think, some weaknesses in the church and our business in COVID, knowing what we know, I think that's really important for the future of the kingdom of what God is doing in America. We have an opportunity to go on the offensive. We have an opportunity to use our business for the kingdom like never before. And back to the parable of the talents, like, you need to be responsible with what God's given you. Well, get around like-minded people that are doing that too. And so that's the idea behind the Business Makers Network. We do also my Fight Laugh Feast conference from my show is in Nashville, October 16th through the 18th, but we do a pre-Business Makers conference as part of that. We've been doing that for 3 years. And so we do on Thursday, we have a whole, we've had a number of great speakers at that pre-Business Makers conference, and you can just join us for the family conference you want. But that's on Thursday, May 2nd, October 16th in Nashville. We'll do the pre-Business Makers conference and everything's fantastic. A couple hundred come every year and everything, and I think it's actually going to grow a lot this year, given that we've also launch the Business Makers Network. So thank you guys so much for coming. We like starting off with Psalms. I like starting off with beer. I like starting off with food. Good, this is a great way to fellowship with one another. I like ending with cigars, stuff like that. That's all intentional to build what we're doing here at Business Makers. It's unique, a little odd maybe to you guys if you're new to what we're doing, but it really is intentional what we're trying to do, and not trying to flaunt anything of what we're doing, trying to do it for good fellowship and for the kingdom and everything.